Well, as you could hear, the narrators of of Chiller stories, come in all shapes and sizes, and some are furry. I was actually reminded of this story seeing the street dogs in Delhi, so I said, why don't you read this one? So, do you have any questions to the authors? I'm sure you do.
Are you asking for questions, or do you want to engage in a dialogue?
Well, a dialogue starts with a question, I suppose. So, yes. Or comments?
Should be happy for a dialogue also.
Yeah. No, I mean, I can't see a difference. Sorry. Yeah.
If you wanted us to ask questions about the translator, your publisher, the difficulties you have,
No,
or
questions
it's
can be
about the
anything. Yeah,
creative
exactly,
act, because
exactly.
these were three
Yeah.
extraordinary, powerful examples of European writing that just carried aloft. I guess just one, since I want to think of this in terms that, starting with John, that you raised about the way you perceive living under troubles and post-troubles, how precious that was, and how in jeopardy things are now. And capturing that in literature, I don't want to make, there was an allusion made earlier on to political trends emerging in various countries. Of course, all the countries here represent that trend, as does India and the United States. So we need to reflect on these things. And one of the thoughts that occurred to me in hearing you, I don't want to take too direct a parallel, but there is something that others might want to engage in discussing here of the Northern Ireland situation contrasted and compared as lived by human beings with Kashmir. Obviously it's not a direct parallel, it's not a military occupation or all the rest, but it's a question of identity, where you come from, what it was like growing up, when times were worse, when times were better, times are getting better now, and there's a political horizon that is uncertain. We don't know what's going to happen. We don't know how bad it's going to be for the emergence of the sort of harmony that you described in Northern Ireland. Is that in jeopardy now with Brexit situations? Also tense in Kashmir for opportunities. So I don't know, that occurred to me as something that might be worth reflecting on, and whether the literary act is something that would probably also emerge in Kashmir.
Yeah, I could talk about that definitely. I'll turn on.
Excuse
I
me.
want to think about
Yeah.
it.
Can I just ask? Excuse me. Can you hear at the back? Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to join you.
Yeah.
Mas.
Yeah, okay. So one thing was that I think in Kashmir there have been, I believe, trends of with regards to even the language choice.
Yeah.
So English in the past decade or so has been a conscious choice for them, because they want to internationalize their struggle and draw attention to their condition. So then relating that slightly perhaps to what you were saying is that I mean, I get part of it, but perhaps you could say a little more about it. Is that when you write from a Protestant position and you're bringing that side of Northern Ireland out, is there then now you feel that there's you hinted towards that, I suppose, but is there now a sense of being kept out of an Irish culture? Is that what you said, in fact? But vis-a-vis Northern Ireland, then, is that quite in the case? Because definitely there's an emphasis on both Celtic, Gaelic and Irish culture from the Republic, but then from within the North, from whatever, for example, Eureka Street, Rupnik,
Alex is grand.
But I just have a few meandering thoughts. I don't think I know. I just have a few meandering thoughts, and maybe I'm kind of sort of retracting from what both of them said. So of course, Salman Rushdie, but I'm also quite compelled to think about someone like Isabel Allen. And what seemed to me to come through from each of your presentations, thank you very much, was really that the context from where you're writing seems to speak in quite interesting ways through your writing. So I'm thinking also as writers who are determining choices of language, and through language, of course, a kind of politics, but also choice of characters, situations, etc. How much of the context really becomes the ground from which you begin to weave something? And this is, of course, thinking about context in political, social, cultural ways. It's a kind of broader question, I understand, it's too big, but just to be able to address what part of the context and how the context becomes important to your process of writing. How does one weave that in? What are the ways in which one is responding to the context?
Okay. Right, I'll begin with context because that's the easiest one to do. I think one of the big questions we get asked a lot at the minute is it a writer's responsibility to be political and to engage with the politics of the age? And my answer is no, it's not their responsibility, but I think it's almost impossible to write without politics in your work right now, because anyone who's embedded in a culture, their work is going to have a little shade of the context they write in. My practice is very much a 50-50 practice. So I am a writer, but for 20 years I've engaged in community arts, which in Northern Ireland is an integral part of the peace and reconciliation process. So I've used the arts to bring communities from... I now dislike saying both sides of the community, because in Northern Ireland there is an increasing amount of migrants who've moved there who are a different community, and there are also a large number of young people who don't see themselves as Protestant or Catholic. And the reconciliation process through arts brings everyone together. So I work in East Belfast, I live in East Belfast, and I write about East Belfast, and it would be almost impossible for me to write something devoid of context. I just finished a journalistic piece at home about living in, do you know what terraced housing is? The little houses all jammed together. I live in a house like that. I can hear when my neighbour goes to the toilet. There's no separation between the public and the private when you live that closely, both in terms of your own life and your writing. So I think it's impossible to separate context. In terms of Kashmir, I've been paired with Kashmiri writers 3 times this year. When you come from a divided community, you tend to get paired with Kashmiri writers from Cyprus and writers from Palestine. What have I learnt? It's a very complex situation, and every conflict situation is different. So what works and what is problematic in Kashmir is different to what's problematic in Northern Ireland, but there is a lot to be learned. And I think the key is a word which has been mentioned a number of times: identity. The most beautiful thing about the Good Friday Agreement was that it created a space for people to be plural in their identities, that you did not have to be just Irish or just British. So I would have defined myself as politically British, but I'm an Irish writer. Like, who wouldn't want to be associated with Joyce and Edna O'Brien and Beckett and Yeats? Much better than the English lots. So I felt like I could carry those two identities, multiple ideas of it. I quoted a couple of nights ago, we have a poet called John Hewitt from home. He was a socialist poet, he's very dead now, but he said, I am an Ulsterman, which means Northern Irish. I am an Irishman, I am a British man, I am a European, and I am a citizen of the world. And to undermine one facet of my identity is to undermine the whole. That, I think, is a statement for what it means to be European, what it means to be Indian. It's complex. And that space to be plural actually allows people room to breathe. And if we could allow that, what's happening with Brexit now feels like a line is being drawn. And every time I approach the airport counter now, I have to go, oh, will I be Irish today or will I be British? I quite like to put both passports down and go, can I be both, please? We have a fantastic Northern Irish poet who some of you may know called Louis MacNeice, wrote Autumn Journal and some beautiful writing. And he has a poem called Snow, and there's a line in it which I'm going to absolutely murder, but he talks about the multiplicity of being various. And isn't that a beautiful statement, if we could all be various and allow other people to be various? And that's the end of my sermon. Do you,
Because you have to answer the other question, not the writer about context.
Okay, for me it is very important. Language is something that creates me, and what I discovered that. Oh, I'm sorry. Should I start from the beginning or? Okay. What I discovered that Polish language is in some themes are really limited. I felt when I wrote the novel Friday, it is about discovering sensuality. It is about eroticism. Polish language, in spite of the fact it is really rich, in that topic it is really limited, and I think that it is about our culture. Our culture is conservative culture, a Catholic culture. We are not able to speak up about our bodies, our sensualities. Even it is very difficult to speak about experience of strong emotions. So that was a challenge for me. And but what I discovered here in India, yesterday we also had a kind of live reading and meeting with people who, after our reading, got very interesting feedback that Indian languages are you have the same challenge. It is universal topic. It is not only a Polish problem. How to find proper words to express emotions, to express feelings. So yeah, it is interesting, and yeah, I think that it is our common experience. It is something universal we face, in spite of fact our languages are different.
I don't actually have anything new to add to what they said. It's pretty much the
And
same
what you
for me.
said
Yes.
in your introduction. Yes.
I think I need this, but yeah, I was in Paris during the Solidarity movement, and this was something that was extremely strong and adopted, at least by young people in Paris at the time. I mean, there was kind of a euphoria, and the Communist Party, some people joined, some people didn't. And unfortunately, I had to go out of the room while you were talking a little bit more about the context of your writing. But this was, I felt, a turning point in the sense that you had people, because solidarity was happening somewhere else, that you could have people from different political groups coming together, and in very different neighborhoods. I lived in the Bastille. People were coming together, weekly meetings, cheering, making posters, marches, everything. So it was very powerful. Okay, my question is, what happens now? What's happening now? Is this a strong legacy? And I will add that there were many women, especially students though, who were very active in the Paris movement as well. So what's happening now? Is this a fond memory, or is it a legacy?
It is not a simple answer to that, but what for me what is important to realize, because I think that we as a Polish society are not aware of the fact that in our history there is we have such beautiful heritage, such moment that we were united, we were together. It was just a short moment in our history. After what happened after the collapse of communism in 1989, people were really disappointed of the transformation, of the political transformation. Some of women I interview, when I ask them to tell their stories, they don't want to get back to that history because of disappointment, because of a kind of feeling that then during the solidarity opposition movement they would know what will happen, and they dreams were about different kind of Poland, different shape. I am really happy that in Poland my movie started open a discussion on the role of women, what happened after. But I am also really disappointed because I met a lot of intelligent, powerful women that were risked everything then in the 80s. Some of them were arrested, some of them were imprisoned. And after that, after 89 came, they decided not to involve in politics, not to create a new free Poland. They slipped into a shadow. I don't know why. There is no simple answer, but my movie opened a discussion, and now we discuss the topic of the role of women. And I feel that in contemporary Poland, in my generation, much more women are aware of the fact that if they want to change reality, if they want to have an impact on what shape of Poland has now, they should get involved in politics. They should not be afraid of that. So it is kind of empowerment.
I think it's really interesting as well the way you talked about how what happened in Poland had a knock-on effect in other places. We actually talked in the car this morning. We were so heartened yesterday by the Boris Johnson news. Alexandra and I were standing in front of the TV going, yes! And it's interesting to wake up this morning and what's happening in America. There's a move to try and impeach Trump. And I know, the Berlin Wall comes back down, and that begins to encourage movements around the world. For us in Northern Ireland, the end of apartheid in South Africa was a huge influence on really pushing for peace and reconciliation in Northern Ireland. And I think it's why these things are really important. We need to talk about the successes and the triumphs to encourage other people. I talked to a wonderful woman last night who has really pushed for women's publishing in India, and it absolutely parallels the women's publishing movement in Ireland, and we need to share these stories just so we don't feel as lonely sometimes.
Not to dampen the mood or anything, but just going back to Poland, does what's happening right now, current political situation, also in terms of gender rights, all the questions about women's equality, how far women can go, especially in light of the church, but not just, does that inform any of your writing at the moment? I mean, it's such a powerful issue, and I think it's so difficult to talk about simply because there's a huge backlash against this kind of openness. Does that influence your writing in any way?
Yeah, it is also a kind of taboo issue. What I'm trying to do to open the discussion, and what we realized that after political transformation, Polish women lost their rights. They had some reproductive rights before the transformation, political transformation in communist Poland, and after that, because of big role of Catholic Church, they lost their rights. And we are still protesting this issue. Even 3 years ago in Poland we had a big black protests against very restricted anti-abortion law. Women were wearing black, taking black umbrellas in their hands. There were thousands of them on the street, and our government didn't react on that. So yeah, there are many issues that we still I feel that we are still struggling for. Apart from that, we faced gender payment gap, domestic violence. There are many things to do, should be done, and yeah.
Hello, my name is Galina and I'm also from the Balkans, from Bulgaria. So when you talk about stubbornness and patriarchy as well, I hear you, and I also hear you when you talk about feeling comfortable at the edge of East and West, if you would agree to move the border a little bit further north than west. So I liked also very much the way that you showed the place that patriarchy, the role that it played throughout your life, but you did not attack it frontally, so to speak. You sort of, it seems you meandered your way through it thanks to the stubbornness factor as well, I guess. So I like this attitude very much because it sort of preserves also a joy for life. Huh? You made your way through it, and you played somehow with it. And I enjoyed very much your story about the dogs as well. Thank you.
Well, thank you. I hear you, sister. I really do. And I love going to festivals because at every festival I find another soul sister, and I'm like, how many soul sisters could I have? Because I think it generally in worldly women especially, we share a lot of unspoken and spoken feelings and challenges and things. I learned to forgive. So the struggle at home and in Turkey, at schools, in work life, that taught me to be strong. And you know, in our countries, if you're not a survivor, you cannot make it, basically. So you really become very tough, emotional as well. But then that's why maybe that's an interesting comment I'm hearing for the first time. But you are absolutely right. I think if I still was very, angry with it, and if I couldn't have processed it into a creative channel and learned to forgive, I think I wouldn't be here. So I'm very grateful that you made that comment. Well, it seems like I'm going backward when it comes to form, because the first storybook I wrote was in 2006, and it was like a jungle. It actually had visuals in it, drawn by an artist. And I have one story there written in the form of email. In 2006, not email, the social media language, like really distorting the language. And those days it wasn't sort of, we were not thinking about it. And then exile is, I was saying to my editor in Turkey, should I add some drawings? She's like, no, the text is powerful, we just stick to the text. And now I'm writing a more conventional novel. So for me, it's I'm just going backward in the form. But I'm also, I think, personally very open to mixing forms, mixing performance with reading, and I didn't have the time and the possibility to mix things badly in Turkey, apart from the novel I'm writing. Because now I see in the Netherlands, it's really disciplines are even more interacting with each other. I think good novels will survive as long as, literature exists. Maybe people will read it from e-readers or from other tools, but good novels, good storytelling is essential. It will survive. And it's something that the machines will not be able to do. But apart from it, I'm not against into disciplines interacting with each other, and I see there are new trends that immerse text with visuals, or like hypertext, microfiction, microfiction. There is a new channel of expressing yourself, which I find really fine. But I think personally, I try not to lose the essence of storytelling.
For me, all of it is about storytelling. But as I mentioned before, I didn't attend to any creative writing course, but I am trying to write, and I write novels. I had an experience to write non-fiction and hypertext. I was educated to have skills to make documentaries, and what I discover, because I'm making my films as an independent filmmaker, I am responsible for the production and also for the distribution. And regarding to that, it is much more easier to distribute films with English subtitles all over the world than to translate novel into many languages. So my works as a documentary filmmaker, my movies have been screened all over the world, in Brazil, in Turkey, Russia. They are telling this Polish history, but this story is universal, because every country has its own history and her story. And her story is that half part of the history that is covered. So with the films, I have much more possibilities to present them to foreign audience.
I'll just say a couple of things on form. Form really interests me. I work in novel, short story, microfiction. I write for TV, radio, and I've just finished my first play. So how do we go at everything? I think two things for me which have been huge is the impact of the internet. One, particularly in the short story format, I think it reduced down very quickly what people wanted to read and could read. So if you look at the classical short story writers like Hemingway and people like that, they were writing long form short stories. If you look at what journals are asking for now, it's quite often under 3,000 words. That's a very different short story experience. So I think it's really intriguing to me to see all of the news forms come in. The prose poem really intrigues me. you know, things like Claudia Rankine, is it, you know, what is it? Is it a poem? Do we even care what it is if it's that good? I don't. But I think we need to be very careful that we don't let the form dictate exactly what Marta was saying, that the story content is still really good. So some of my students will do things like write these fractured sentences with one word sentence, or a run on like a whole chapter long with no punctuation. And I'll say, why did you do that? And they'll say, because it's trendy, that's what you do now. If someone has learned the rules and they're breaking the rules because they have a reason for why they're doing it, absolutely. The second thing I think around form is a much more important issue, and it's about access. I think we need to really radically rethink what story means. Literary fiction is in some ways really, really difficult for certain people to access. You know, in Britain anyway, it can be perceived as something that's for educated people, something that's posh, and there shouldn't be two levels of story, really dumbed down stuff that people who aren't educated have access to, and then, you know, the highfalutin thoughts that educated people get. How do we do that? I think we need to really look at our storytellers, and by that I don't just mean writers, I mean musicians. Like, it's so intriguing when you listen to, you know, a piece of rap music that has a really strong, like, provocative message in it. That's how you get story out to the masses. Or when you turn on the TV and someone has actually thought, you know, we could get a message to people through a crime drama. You know, what if crime drama actually challenged attitudes about women or class? And you can get this incredible story to a mass of people. So I think we need to think more about how we are storytellers, to make story more accessible.
Last word. What can I say? The last word. Anyway, it would be thank you. It would be I have to say, I mean, we have done a lot in India, and we have worked with, as an organization, and me personally, we have worked with a vast number of people, both writers and audiences and organizers of events, and there's something about the kind of intensity of engagement that I encounter in India every time, and genuine interest, and, you know, good questions and so on. So thank you, and thank you, the educators who actually encourage this.
Yes, you've already received the ceremonial shawl, so I won't be giving them to you. But thank you, really, really, very sincerely. Thank you for coming. What a wonderful group of writers. What a wonderful organization. And thank you for bringing the people here. I think that I can say personally, I could sit here for a couple of hours and, you know, think about what you're saying, asking you to read more, and trying to understand this diversity of women from different parts of the world. In one sense, expressing a similar idea in very different contexts, and really bringing the power of women to the fore without a heavy-handed approach, with such diversity of approach. I certainly hope our students will be able to come, and break away from their midterm exams. I hope that we'll be able to have more workshops, though, at different times and different spaces. So thank you very, very much, and enjoy the rest of your day. Welcome to the campus, and consider it a place you can always return to.
If I could just add a word of thanks to the two institutions that have brought us here, and it would be the EU really, and the EU delegation here, but also the Cultural Diplomacy Platform, which is a small organization that now implements the external relations policy in culture. And if this is what cultural diplomacy looks like, I think, I'm for it. So thank you, and thank you for the warm reception.
I have a final and more sort of everyday kind of announcement. We have lunch at T1 Adda for everyone, really. I think we can afford to have everyone who's here, not audience. So please do join us, and you can have more conversations with the writer, with Alexander, with everyone. And the students have been quite demure, really quiet. Please feel free to chat with them and introduce yourselves over lunch. So T1 Adda. Thank you.
And we often have dogs coming to lunch. Well,
I'll be happy to talk to them.
And this will, of course, be followed by the workshops that three writers are conducting for us, for students, for which we are looking forward to a bigger turnout. But any of you faculty also who wish to attend are welcome to. Other faculty have signed up. So yeah, see you soon.